Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2019 Final Report webinar number 1. This webinar is covering mainly the final report process for support for artists and creative individuals, festivals, and support for organizations 1 and 2. And so what we're going to be looking at is a live demonstration on how to do that for those 3 annual grant programs. And so really quickly with some introductions, my name is Quang Vu. I am the Grants and Communications Coordinator for the Houston Arts Alliance. And we're going to be walking through this webinar today. And so I'm going to be moving fairly quickly. So a quick introduction into today's agenda. We're going to be running through a couple of housekeeping rules. Then we're going to look at the final reporting overview of what is a final report and why you have to submit a final report for anybody who's received grants through the Houston Arts Alliance from the City of Houston. And then a live demonstration of the final report process in our final report portal, which is going to be a majority of this webinar, tips for a successful submission, and then we're going to end with the post-submission process. So what happens after you hit that submit button, and then your final report is then sent to the grants team. All right, so here are the housekeeping rules. I won't be reading through all of them, but I do want to emphasize that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website as a resource for you guys to use and refer back to as you're completing your final report, just so you have this information available. All right, jumping into the final report overview, what is the purpose of a final report? A final report essentially is a summary of programs and financial activities from the project you completed through your grant. And so what we're going to be looking at once you submitted your final report is a variety of things that summarizes all of this information in our final report portal. And so you cannot complete a final report until you've completed your project. You have to complete your project and your public presentation before you can start on your final report and submit your final report. And then for the requirements section, all grantees who receive a city-funded grant through HAA are contractually required to submit a final report to receive their final payment as a project reimbursement. Continuing with the final report overview, just reiterating that this webinar is discussing how you are going to submit your final report for support for artists and creative individuals, festivals, and support for organizations, which are our 3 annual city-funded grant programs. And so if you were awarded any of these grants in 2019, your grant term is ending on December 31st, 2019. That is the end of your grant term. That is the date in which you have to wrap up all of your projects, all of your seasons of activities, unless you were awarded an extension. And then I do want to note that this webinar will not reflect any of the final reporting information for our 2020 annual grants. So we're focusing only on 2019 grant programs and just these 3 grant programs for this webinar. Next, we're going to talk about the deadline. The deadline to submit your final report is January 31st, 2020 for the 3 grant programs that we just discussed. Unless you were approved an extension, then you will have a different date. And then you'll have to refer to your extension for the new date in which you have to submit your final report. But for everybody else who wasn't awarded an extension, you have to submit your final report no later than January 31st, 2020. And the portal to access our final report is at the bottom of the screen. That is haatx.com/final_reporting. So now we're going to jump into the live demo. So again, this is the link that we're going to go to. I'm exiting out of the presentation to access our final reporting page. And so once you type in that link, this is where it's going to take you. And for the sake of this webinar, we're going to go ahead and select this link right there, which will take you to the final report portal for our annual grants programs. It's a submittable page, and before you can access the final report itself, the first step is to create an account. If you already have an account, you'll go ahead and select Sign In. So since I already have an account, I'm going to go ahead and select Sign In and start on my final report. So here, you're going to put clearly your name, contact information, and then your email, and then you're going to select which grant program that you were awarded a grant from. So it could be festivals, support for artists and creative individuals, or support for organizations. You'll select whichever one was in your contract or you applied for. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm selecting support for artists and creative individuals, and then selecting the 2019 year. And then here, you'll input your award number. Your award number is a 6-digit number that can be found on your award contract. So if you're not sure where to find it, you can refer back to your contract. If you don't know where your contract is or have difficulty locating it, you're more than welcome to reach out to the grants department and we'll help you locate your award number. And then in this section is if you requested an extension and you were approved, you'll mark yes. So I'm marking no here because I didn't request an extension. And so if you did get an extension, you'll have to put your new project end date here. But if you weren't awarded an extension, you'll put here the original project end date that you had in your proposal and that is on your contract. Next, we're going to move into marketing materials. So in this section here, you're going to upload a screenshot of your event on the cultural events calendar. All grantees who received a grant from Houston Arts Alliance are contractually obligated and required to submit a cultural events calendar submission of their project to our calendar. So if you did, your screenshot will look a little bit something like this. And that's what you'll upload into the section in these acceptable file formats right here. If you weren't able to get a screenshot, we also take permalinks of your cultural events calendar submission as well. And then if you weren't able to get a link or a screenshot and weren't able to upload your event, you'll have to provide a reason as to why you weren't able to submit your event to the cultural events calendar in this section here. Next, in the marketing materials section, we're looking to see if you use the City of Houston and HA's logo in your marketing. This, like the cultural events calendar submission, is also required in your contract, and you do have to include both HAA and the City of Houston's logo. And so you can see here in this icon that it has both HAA's logo and the City of Houston's seal on the flyer. And then also just reminding you guys that you have to include acceptable file formats here. Next, you'll have to include images from your project that was supported by the grant, and these have to be high resolution images as well. And also on the right side, you'll find that the final report portal lets you know how many uploads you have to include for each section. And so for this section, you'll have to include 2 file uploads. And these are my 2 event images that I am including for my project. Next, we're going to the narrative section for impact. And so it says, describe the impact of this grant on your audience, your artistic practice, or your organization. And so here we want to hear about the impact that this grant had on your personal artistic practice and how you learned a lot by building this project through creative exploration. If you were an organization, you'll talk about the impact that these dollars had on your seasons of activities and your programs and throw that into the section here. Next, we're going to go into programming locations. And so for programming locations, you'll start by clicking this link here, which takes you to a Dropbox page. To download your template of the 2019 programming locations report, you're going to click here, select direct download. Your download will start right there, and you'll go ahead and select your Excel sheet and make sure you have it open. And once you have it open, there will be two tabs in your Excel sheet. The first tab includes instruction information on how you can complete your location data. Here, this is where you're going to do data entry for your programming locations data. And so for an individual who might only have one location where they hosted their event, you'll just include it as one line. In this example, I have Match as my location for where I hosted my event. And then you'll make sure that you complete all of the fields in the programming locations report. And if you're unsure of your council district down here, the way you can find that out is you can go to Google, type in who is my city council member, select on the first link that pops up, and it will take you to the City of Houston webpage for council district search. You'll type in the address for where you had your venue location, and then it will give you a council district in which that venue location belongs to. I do want to emphasize, as you are completing the 2019 program's location report, that you can only include data for venue locations and exhibition spaces that are within the City of Houston, because those are eligible event submissions. And then we also cannot accept any event submissions or venue submissions in the programming locations report that isn't considered an eligible program location. Ineligible program locations are ones that do not have a public presentation component and isn't publicly accessible. Okay, so once you've filled that out, you'll go ahead and go back and upload your programming locations report here. Next is the narrative questions section of our final report process. And so here is the project summary. If you want to use the project summary that you had in your initial application, you're more than welcome to copy and paste that into the section here. Or if you want to reiterate and refine it a little bit more when you write out your project summary, you're more than welcome to do so in this area. Next, we want to hear about resources and needs that you guys wanted in order to be more successful with your project. So for example, if you wanted to learn more about professional development courses for artists and creatives, or as an organization, you wanted to understand what type of affordable venue spaces exist in Houston as you were planning your event, you could throw that in here for your application. And so you'll fill out these sections as you're moving through. And then the next narrative section is deviations and lessons learned from your project. And here we're looking to see what kind of lessons did you realize as you were creating your project and moving through its development? And where did you deviate from in your budget or in your initial proposal, and why? And what happened to result in those deviations? I also want to emphasize that each narrative section does have a word limit, and Submittable will notify you once you've entered in words that have exceeded the word limit in the final reporting portal. Next, we're going to tackle the financial final report section. So here you'll click the link again. It'll take you to a Dropbox page. And once you're in the Dropbox page, you'll click the download button right there. Select direct download. Once you hit direct download, it'll start the download in the corner over there. I've already completed the financial final report on my own, and this is what it looks like for me as somebody who's completed it as a grantee. And so there are two tabs as well for this. The first tab is the instructions tab, but also the attestations tab. And so there are 5 checkboxes that you will have to check in this section as you're completing your financial final report The first is a verification section. The second is that you are attesting that the financial expenses in the second tab don't fall under items and expenses that are ineligible under the hot tax code. Essentially, what that means is it's saying that you're attesting that you're not spending money on things that you shouldn't be spending these grant dollars on. After you've attested and verified to that, down here, you're going to put your name. You're going to put your date over here, and then title. And then over here in detail financials, I've already went ahead and filled it out. And so at the top, you'll put the name of your project, your grant number in the line under that. And then here, as you're filling out the financial final report, you're going to go ahead and detail the full expense list of everything that you spent the grant on. And at the bottom, the amount should total the full award that you were given for the grant. And so in this scenario, it's support for artists and creative individuals, which is a $15,000 grant. And I've detailed all of my expenses here in the amounts, and it adds up to $15,000 over here in the right column. And I've also gone back to double check that all of my expenses are eligible under the hot tax code. And then additionally, for the check line over here, you'll only have to include check numbers for things that you actually wrote a check for. If it was an invoice number, you don't have to worry about it. You won't have to put it in the section. I also want to add that as you're completing this section, back in the instruction section, that all items reported are subject to audit by HA for up to 3 years from the date submitted, which is the line right here. This is also the same language in your contract as well. So HA reserves the right to go and audit this information at any time and request for financial receipts for the detailed financials that you are including in this section. So it is incredibly important to make sure that as you're filling this out, you also have financial receipts and documentation to support the expenses that you are including in your financial final report. All right, so that was a bit of a mouthful, but that is the financial final report section. Once you've completed it, you can close out of that and then go here to upload your financial final report. So that is my financial report right there. Again, you're attesting to the same things here that you attested to in the financial final report, just to make sure that you've fully reviewed the material and understand as you are closing out to the grant, you are attesting to these legal binding obligations. And then I'm going to hit yes here and type in my name here. And then submit. All right, so my final report is done for 2019. So now that that's done and we've gone through the full demonstration, let's talk about tips for a successful submission. The first thing I want to emphasize is completion. Completion is incredibly, incredibly important, and I want to make sure that as you're going through your final report, that you're double checking, triple checking for errors, incomplete things that might be incorrect in your final report. The reason being is incomplete submissions will delay your final payments. We cannot approve incomplete final reports, and so when we do receive them, we will communicate with you and let you know what is incomplete in your final report. The next thing is documentation. So be sure to have your materials ready for your submission when you're completing the final report. And here we have a documents checklist for your final report that you'll need as you're completing it. And so you can refer to this document checklist at any time if you feel like you want to go back to this webinar and have this as a resource. A new change that we made is the save draft feature, which allows you to save your work and return to it. So For those of you who haven't used Submittable before, once you scroll to the bottom, you have two options. Either you can hit complete and submit, or on the other side, you can hit save draft. If you hit save draft and you have to go take a phone call, you need to meet, you have a meeting, or you have to take a lunch break or something, you have to go back, you can easily access your final report draft that you're working on by going to your portal, selecting My Submissions, and then once you're in My Submissions, you can look at the submissions that you're working on, select your final report form, and then continue working from there. All right, so now that we've covered tips for successful submissions, let's jump into the post-submission process, which is what does it look like after I hit submit? Grant staff has a 30-day window to review your final report, and final reports are reviewed on a first-come, first-served basis. And so if you submit earlier, we're going to review your final report earlier. I do want to emphasize that final payments for 2019 will be issued after January 31st, 2020. So if you're submitting your final report for 2019, again, final payments will be issued after January 31st, 2020. The reason being is we can only disperse payments to grantees once we receive payments from the city of Houston. And for us, that happens in late January of 2020. So nobody will be getting their final payments until after this date. However, we will still be processing final reports, so please make sure to send them in. The next thing that happens is you will be notified if there are any issues with your final report, and then completed reports will be approved for payments. So once they're approved for payments, payments typically take 2 to 3 weeks for processing. And again, I want to emphasize that final payments will be made after January 31st, 2020. So final payments won't actually hit your accounts until 2 to 3 weeks after that date. So expect your final payments to start coming in at around February. And then there is a line at the bottom that I want to read really quick that says, please contact us if your physical mailing address or contact banking information on file needs to be updated. The reason why is because we want to make sure that when we pay people out, we're paying people out to the correct banking information that we have on file. So if you believe that your banking information is out of date and it needs to be updated, please go ahead and email and contact the grants team in our general grants inbox and let us know so we can revise that and make sure that we're paying you guys to the correct banking information. As of right now, the banking information that we have is from the ACH paperwork that everyone completed at the beginning of 2019. Additionally, individual grant recipients will receive a 1099 tax form in the mail from HAA. They will be postmarked and mailed by January 31st, 2020. So the reason why you are all getting, if you are an individual, getting a 1099 tax form is because all individuals are considered to be independent contractors with HAA. So again, if you believe any of the information for your physical mailing address or your banking information has changed, please reach out to Grants and let us know. All right, so that covers that. That is the full final reporting process for 2019, focusing mainly on our 3 annual grant programs, which is support for artists and creative individuals, festivals, and support for organizations. And so we look forward to being of assistance in helping you close out your amazing city-funded projects with ease. And on behalf of the grants team, we have enjoyed being able to support you throughout your creative projects. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope that this was a good resource for you. And yeah.